After making literal hundreds of videos on both games and playing them for years, the best thing that ever happened to Genshin isn't a new character or a new region, or even the promises we get every patch. It's actually another game, a game that seems to be its competition, but secretly pushed Genshin back on track toward being the best again. So let's start from the beginning, from Monopoly to comparison to the result. Genshin wasn't just any game that released. It was the game that shaped Gacha forever. It didn't just force players to enter this genre, it made them love it so much that it gave a new face to the entire Gacha industry. No game came anywhere close to the level of scale and quality it provided, which ultimately resulted in massive success. But at the same time, there were problems that ultimately led to thousands of players quitting. From long-requested basic QoL changes to the same old gacha system that only focuses on draining your wallets, these issues kept piling up, becoming bigger and bigger. Even I, someone who played this game since Tartaglia's first banner, had to quit. Honestly, those days were trash. Deserts and mazes with hours of long, literal bullshit that you were forced to play through. It was just too much. Especially with the lack of any real rival, there was nowhere else for the audience to go. Every so-called Genshin killer came and vanished within months. Then came Wuthering Waves. In the beginning, the game faced multiple issues, from glitches to a lack of story depth. It seemed like just another Genshin killer that failed to deliver what it promised. But it did one thing that Genshin didn't do. It listened to the audience. The devs kept improving the game, not only by adding QoL features that Genshin players had been begging for years, but also by refining the story and gameplay. With time, it reached a stage where, after years, there was finally a game that could stand somewhere. But here's the thing, it didn't just make itself better. It forced the entire gacha genre and Genshin to start listening. While Wuthering Waves was rising, Genshin wasn't having the same luck.
With the introduction of the Natlan region, the game faced one of the biggest player drops in its history, a massive player revolt. But it wasn't because Natlan was terrible or because it hit some kind of limit. It was because players had finally tasted something better, something worth investing their time in. Even I, personally, not only enjoyed Wuthering Waves, but it honestly ruined Genshin for me. Not because Genshin got worse, but because Wuthering Waves was just better. Small QoL changes like the ability to fly or skipping useless forced dialogues, to exploration that actually felt enjoyable, these changes made a massive difference. And it wasn't just me. Thousands of players felt the same. At this point, Genshin had two paths. Either stick to the same pattern they've been following for years with fake promises and recycled systems, or finally start listening. And they chose the same pattern again, promising us loadouts, higher rewards, better narration, and honestly, I had lost hope. It felt like they were never going to change. But this time, they actually did. They finally listened. They gave us a region and a world that players truly loved. A world clearly inspired by Enkanomiya, which thousands of people had loved before. And not just the map, but the story. A story that finally valued our time. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I needed a skip button. Except from adding features like free constellations that at first seemed useless, but actually had long-term value, to finally addressing kit changes and admitting the power creep that exploded during Fontaine and Natlan.
The old resin system was changed, not only by increasing the cap, but also by recently removing the need to craft condensed resin. Now you can simply farm domains freely. Not only that, the artifact grind, which was once pure luck, was finally given some structure with a system that actually guarantees you something. You now have the freedom to re-roll, refine, and rebuild artifacts again and again. For the first time, Genshin finally feels like it's listening. I'm not saying it's perfect. There are still faults. The skip button is still missing. The so-called free constellation that looked like a great gift still holds some drawbacks. And the devs continue to ignore some feedback. But at least something changed. Something that actually felt good after years of silence. Something that finally gave hope. that the game will continue to change for the better. Currently, there's no real comparison between Genshin and WuWa. As a player, I still prefer Wuthering Waves every time. But Genshin is finally on a path that might lead it to actually listen to what players want, to what we value, and to learn how a game that launched with the worst possible state became the best gacha game currently, just by following one simple rule: listening.
With the latest launch of Miliastra Wonderland, we saw this cycle repeat again. A massive outrage from fans, and false promises that made us dream big, only to be met with the same old reply: silence. And once again, it made us question, was that glimpse of hope just an illusion? Were the small QOL changes just a distraction? Or this time, does that silence mean something different? A quiet admission that it was a blunder, and that they simply have no answer for how to fix it? Which honestly makes sense, considering the massive marketing effort put behind the launch, which resulted in nothing. Even after multiple creators, both sponsored and non-sponsored, covered Miliastra Wonderland, it all led to the same result: nothing. It feels even worse than the old teapot system, something that players completely ignored, pretending it didn't even exist. And that brings us to the real question. It's not about whether Genshin can ever match WuWa's features, but whether HoYoverse can ever fundamentally change its corporate culture. Unlike the bond between Kuro game devs and their players, which is built on trust and transparency, the relationship between HoYoverse and its audience has become purely transactional, a system built on extracting value from a captive audience. This dynamic teaches Genshin players a harsh truth: that improvements aren't guaranteed. They must be earned through competitive pressure. Players have been trained to expect a slow, agonizing drip feed of minor fixes, because the developers have historically operated on a principle of minimal viable change. Therefore, even if Genshin eventually delivers all of the same QOL features as Wuthering Waves, changes driven by competitive fear, it still won't achieve that same level of trust. Because the trust in Wuthering Waves was built through a proven track record of aggressive listening, humility, and immediate course correction. But as I said, this video isn't about whether HoYoverse will ever change, but about how they've changed so far. And at least after years, we finally saw some results, some hope. With time, Wuthering Waves won't just get better and better, it'll continue to pull Genshin toward improvement, forcing the devs to realize that players now have options, and the rate of change is no longer fast enough to keep them waiting.